Welcome, everyone. Want to make sure that you can hear me okay. Please let me know if you can't hear the audio right now. And I appreciate everyone's patience with the tech issues. But I think that was okay because we had quite a large group activity going out on the circular lawn across the way, so we don't hear that now, which is a good thing. But I want to welcome you to our second webinar in the Leadership and Internships series, Leading by Looking In and Reaching Out. My name is Lisa Peterson, and I'm a new media education specialist with the sponsors of the event, which includes our Center for Public Health Practice and the Center for Health Leadership here at the School of Public Health. And we're excited about this series and hope that it's been very helpful in terms of letting you see how you can get some tips and strategies for improving your practical leadership skills for the summer internships. And just want to put it out there, if you missed our last webinar, not a problem at all, because we'll have that archived on a page with the links as well with this webinar with slides and the webinar recording. So that will be a resource for you as you move forward. And just a little bit about participation. Everybody's phone is muted right now, but if during our presentation or during the Q&A you want to ask a question, there is an option to unmute you, and we'll let you know about that and how to do it when we get there. But for right now, if for some reason your phone becomes unmuted, if you could just kindly mute it back by using *6, that would be helpful. And in terms of those questions you might have or comments for our presenters, please feel free to use the chat box, which is on the left-hand side, to put in questions and comments. And what we'll do is moderate those and do our best to get to them when we get to our Q&A portion. And also, as I said, we'll have links to the webinar recording and the slides that we'll email to you after the event. So stay tuned for that. A little bit about who we're going to be hearing from today, some familiar faces and I think some familiar voices as well. We're going to be joined today by Jen Lachance, who's the Associate Director of the Center for Health Leadership and also the Director of the Center for Health Leadership Fellows program. Joined by Grace Turkis, who's our Director for the 2015 and 2017 Fellows. And I'm going to be here as tech support, kind of the wizard dress, trying to troubleshoot a few of the things that tend to come up like they did at the top of the hour. So for those of you just joining, thanks again for being patient with that. And I'll help facilitate the conversation as we move along. So what I'm going to do right now is welcome Jen. Jen, are you there?
I am here. Can you hear me?
Awesome. And I'll hand it over to Jen.
Great. Well, thank you for that intro, Lisa. And wizard dress is a great description of Lisa because she makes everything seem so seamless for all of us. So I'm excited to be here with everyone for our second webinar this summer around leadership development and using the internships as just a really unique place to sort of try out some of these strategies around leadership development. So here's what we're going to do today. We're going to do a quick temperature check around how things are going right now. We're going to do a quick foundation around receiving feedback, and then we're going to create a window, and I'm going to leave that a little vague so that your curiosity is piqued. We're going to talk about how to contribute to others' growth through feedback as well, and then we'll do a summary and have time for questions. And at the end, we'll talk a little bit about the Leading From Where You Are award, which you should have received some information about earlier this week. So we'll have a little chance to talk you through that as well. So that's where we're headed today. So in terms of our first temperature check, just wanted to ask how things are going and check as many of these off that as apply to you. So how many of these situations apply to you today in your internship? I don't know how I'm doing. I'm not sure what to do with some of the feedback that I've gotten. I've received some input and it's really helping me. I have some constructive feedback that I'd like to share. I have some ideas of ways to improve the organization. And I have ideas about ways an internship at this site could be better set up in the future. So go for that and let us know how it's going. going to give you a little bit of time here, give people a chance to fill it out. So this is great because we're seeing a range. Everybody's having a range of different experiences. I'm still not sure how I'm doing, and so we can revisit some of those ways to solicit some feedback. A lot of people have received input, and it is helping you, and that's great to hear about, to really think about your internship as a way to grow, and that you also have some feedback that you want to share. So this is great. So you may recall that we did a brief intro in our last webinar around how to solicit useful feedback, and we're going to just do a quick refresher right now. So first, we have different assessments, and one of them is around how to receive feedback. So after this webinar today, we're going to send you this full assessment, and it just has a range of different questions to ask you to really think about how you receive feedback from others. Right now, we're going to do a couple of quick polls for just a few of these questions to give you a taste for it. So think about how rarely, sometimes, or often you consistently use this behavior when you're receiving feedback. In this case, I truly listen to what feedback others are saying, rarely, sometimes, or never. And here's your poll. All right, so we seem to have some consistency there. So everyone right now is feeling like they sometimes are able to really listen to what feedback givers are saying. So that's great as a way to just reflect and really be honest with you that sometimes you're able to achieve that and sometimes you're just not. So let's try another one and see where we land on this one. I try to learn from all feedback, even if it is poorly given, rarely, sometimes, or never. And yet again, we're getting some consistency. I hope everyone else is laughing along with me and I just can't hear you. Hopefully you all know you can choose rarely or never as well. But again, so it looks like sometimes is the most popular option here. So let's do one more. I'm willing to admit to and learn from questions about my performance or behavior at work or school. So rarely, sometimes, or never. I'm going to dare someone to choose rarely or never. All right. So we got a whole lot of sometimes. So when you fill out this assessment for yourself, I'm going to challenge you to really, really be brutally honest with yourself on a range of different questions. So these are good questions to think about. Remember that it's going to be a self-assessment, so you don't have to share it with anybody else if you don't want to. And the goal here is just to think about how you can maximize your learning and growth so that you can achieve your goals. And so to really think about, I wish that I was really good about that, but there are times that I'm not. Or, I am really good about this one thing. I'm always very careful. So you may remember this from our last webinar, but there are some blockers to avoid when you are receiving feedback. So things like defensiveness. I'm not the only one who does that. Resistance. There's no way I can change, so why should I? Denial. I'm not to blame. Justification. Well, I can explain that. Attack. What about that person? They're not perfect when you turn it around. Some of the inward focus, which is things like, is that what people have been thinking about me? All the time I thought they liked me. Things like that. You can see the whole making excuses, not trusting the person or the process, masking your true feelings with things like, oh, I don't care. I'm over it. I don't care about that. Or concentrating on the person behind the feedback. Oh, I know who said that one, instead of just hearing the feedback. So these are the types of things, as we talked about in the last webinar, that while we all sometimes can have a tendency to go this way, the impact is that people don't want to give you feedback if this is the reaction that they get. And so you just want to think about that and be really cognizant of some of the places that you may default at times, and to try and counteract. So here are some different ways to receive feedback really well. So know your tendencies on those blockers, like we just talked about. Try to hear the message despite your reactions to the person. So disentangle the what from the who. Try to think of this as coaching. So instead of evaluative, which is you're doing it wrong, try and hear it as I want you to improve. Try to unpack it. So ask some more information, ask for details. Don't dismiss the feedback, but also don't acquiesce. Really try and understand it. Ask for one thing. So what's one thing that I could improve? And start there. And then do some experiments. Try it out. See how it goes. Try and change that one thing, and then go back and ask the person for some feedback around that yet again. So that's just a brief baseline for you and foundation and refresher around some of the feedback and how to receive it well. And now I'm going to transition to Grace, who's going to introduce a helpful way to frame the feedback.
Great. Thanks, Jen. So as Jen mentioned, this framework here is called the Johari Window, and it's a tool that's helpful in understanding how to receive feedback, how to give feedback, and how to grow in self-awareness. So in order to increase our leadership capacity and ability to receive feedback, we must begin by looking internally and understanding the impact we have on those around us. So this is the CHL leadership competency called self-development and awareness. The Johari Window is a tool that was developed by two American psychologists, Joseph Luft and Harry Ingham, in the 1950s. So Joe plus Harry equals Johari. And it presents a framework to better understand ourselves and our relationship with others. By using this tool to enhance self-awareness, we can lay the foundation to better understand our interpersonal relationships and build trust and community. So why is self-awareness important? Well, research from the Center for Leadership at the Tuck School of Business at Dartmouth found that in a study of surgical residents, their self-ratings of their surgical skills failed to anticipate how well they would do on a test of those skills, but ratings by their superiors and their peers did successfully predict their performance. In a study of high school seniors, 70% rated themselves as above average in leadership ability and only 2% as below average. And 94% of college professors surveyed said they do above average work. So how is this possible? Well, intimate knowledge of ourselves is actually surprisingly difficult to acquire because we all have biases that make our perceptions of ourselves inaccurate. Understanding our strengths, our opportunities for development, and the impact we have on others is fundamental to leading effectively. By developing self-knowledge through feedback, we can better understand ourselves, which allows us to collaborate with people from diverse backgrounds and various personality preferences to bring out the best in others, to build community, and to work toward a common vision. So think back to the last time that you received some feedback. It may have been from a friend, a coworker, or a family member. Maybe you learned something about yourself that you didn't know. So just take a moment to reflect on what the impact was on you. What did you learn? Was it something you had an inkling about prior to getting the feedback? How did the feedback make you feel? Well, regardless of how well or poorly the feedback was delivered, the Johari Window can be a useful framework for better understanding our impact. There are two key ideas behind the tool. The first is that we can build trust with others by disclosing information about ourselves. And the second is that we can learn about ourselves and come to terms with personal issues with the help of feedback from others. So the Johari Window has 4 panes that divide personal awareness into 4 different types. There's the open, facade, blind, and unknown. So consider the fact that there are things about yourself that you know, and very likely things about yourself that you don't know. Also, there are things about you that others know, and there are things about you that others don't know. This simple premise forms the basis of a very interesting conversation about who you are, your blind spots, what you're willing to share with others, and the great unknown. The size and the shape of the panes within a person's window will shift depending on the dynamics and relationships within a group. So let's look more closely at each window pane, beginning with the open arena. So the open arena relates to things we know about ourselves and others know about us. For example, a person's height, eye color, and occupation all fall under the open arena. The more you know about yourself and the more you reveal to others, the larger your open arena. And the impact on the people around you is that there's open communication and an atmosphere where trust can be built. One of the best leaders I ever worked with was someone who was very open about his weaknesses, which seems counterintuitive for the typical quote-unquote leader. But it was his vulnerability that pushed the rest of us on the team to be better leaders ourselves. And it allowed us to be open about, it allowed us to be open and both also real about our own struggles and our growth areas. The open arena is a place where our shared understanding of ourselves puts us in real and genuine contact with one another and therefore gives us the capacity to create a common vision for change. The next arena is called the blind spot. It's the window that shows the things we don't know about ourselves that others do. It's sometimes called the spinach in the tooth window. If you just got a little shiver thinking about that, that's normal. Also included in here may be things such as physical mannerisms and certain personality characteristics. So for example, if you think about Katniss Everdeen from The Hunger Games, she's a character who had a huge blind spot. She was a person with tremendous influence, and while everyone else around her saw her as a leader, she didn't quite see herself that way. It took her a while to come to the realization that she had the unique ability to lead the rebellion against the oppressive capital. In another more personal example, I'll share a story about one of my blind spots. I once worked for a nonprofit organization on a small, close-knit team, and every Monday we would have these really, really long staff meetings, about 6 hours in length. And being someone who likes to make to-do lists and check things off of it, at the end of every staff meeting, I'd pack up all my things and I'd be the first person to bolt out the door, anxious to get started on all the things I added to my list. My other colleagues would usually stay around for up to an hour afterwards just to socialize, grab ice cream, and hang out, which I thought was crazy. We had just been there for 6 hours. Well, one day one of my colleagues graciously pulled me aside to tell me that when I bolted out of the meetings every week, it made her feel as though I didn't care about her or the relationships with the other team members. Now, mind you, we were on a very, very close-knit team, and so it wasn't like a typical large organization team setting, but it was pretty intimate, and so the impact that I was having on the others was fairly noticeable. So my coworker told me she wished I stayed behind to hang out with them, even if just for a little while. I didn't realize that my actions were unintentionally communicating that I didn't value my teammates, and I was really grateful that she gave me that feedback about a blind spot of mine. So after that, I started staying later after some meetings to prioritize relationship building with my teammates, even if that meant that there were one or two things I couldn't tackle that afternoon on my to-do list. Soliciting feedback is a way someone might decrease the size of their blind spot. This may be as simple as asking a trusted friend or colleague how you came off in the last meeting. Did I sound too harsh? Did I come off as unconfident? Did I talk too much? Too little? We're all prone to be unaware of some aspects of ourselves, and the quest for self-knowledge can take us on a journey through the underworld of personal demons that we sometimes would rather avoid. But failing to take that journey restricts our capacity to move in the world and positively influence our surroundings. So what is not seen and what facilitates genuine awareness is not only naming the blind spot, but also understanding its full impact. So the next arena is called the facade, or the hidden arena, which includes things we know about ourselves and others don't know. It has to do with our personal private self, and it includes our opinions, attitudes, sensitivities, biases, and other such things. So how much we keep hidden depends on how close we are to another person. We typically reveal more about ourselves to people we trust. And included in the facade window may be such things as fear of heights, belief in religion, political leanings, hidden agendas, and dreams. Some reasons why someone might hold back from disclosing information include lack of trust. We may have feelings we don't feel comfortable discussing with others until we get to know them really well, or we may not want to hurt someone. Sometimes we're afraid that some of that truth may be too hard for someone to take. But authenticity is the practice of showing up in a way that's genuine and true and real as a person. And the facade represents the chosen limits of authenticity. Many of us are good at holding information private, including information that might be very useful to others as a way to protect ourselves or others, and sometimes we're not altogether aware of how hidden we may be. We enjoy sometimes a child's refreshing naivety when they speak their mind and they ask questions, but as adults, we've learned almost as second nature that there may be a cost to personal openness, and some of this is appropriate, and sometimes it's not. A self-aware person is highly aware to the point where that lack of personal openness becomes a pattern of dysfunctional communication, where what he or she is not saying is getting in the way of the very changes he or she would like to make. So the next and final window is called the unknown, because it relates to things that others don't know about you and you don't know either. This could be an untried, untested ability within a person, or a fear or aversion that the individual is unaware of, or subconscious feelings, conditioned behavior from childhood. This is also the arena of potential, of finding one's calling and destiny, where the unique meaning of one's life and work becomes manifest and is consciously experienced. So, for example, once when I was facilitating a session on this Johari Window, one of the participants realized that she had no idea how she would react in an emergency situation, such as if a fire broke out in the building. This was part of her unknown arena. So as a result of reflecting on this aspect of the Johari Window, she signed up for an emergency preparedness class where different emergency scenarios were simulated to train people to know what to do. So ways to explore your unknown arena may include placing yourself in new situations, soliciting feedback, trial and error, or setting goals. So part of what makes a leader trustworthy and therefore successful is communication, letting people know what you're thinking and what drives you. And as this communication is going on, you're exposing things about yourself to others through self-disclosure. You're enlarging the part of the Johari Window called the open arena. So the larger your open arena, the better others understand the characteristics that make you who you are, and the better your understanding of how others see you. Because you're open, your coworkers, teammates, friends don't need to interpret or insert meaning. They can understand your words and actions for what they are, and this openness contributes to a more trusting relationship. And a couple notes here. So when we talk about expanding the open arena, we're talking about doing it judiciously, not just becoming an open book and spilling everything out, but thinking about when and where it's appropriate to share different parts of your life. And also, expanding the open arena is culturally a very Western practice and value. So in other cultures around the world, this may not and is not as appropriate. So you want to be mindful of different cultural norms depending on your context and who you're with. As self-disclosure, soliciting feedback, and self-discovery begin to expand the open arena, your blind spot shrinks. You're seen as more genuine, meaning your facade decreases. And there are fewer questions about your motives and how you will react to those around you, so the unknown will shrink. The aim would be to develop the open arena because when we work in this arena, we are at our most effective and productive selves, and together with those we work with, we can collectively be more effective too. And the open arena can be seen as a space where good communication and cooperation occur, free from distractions, conflicts, and misunderstandings. So that's a brief overview of the Johari Window. So as you look at this poll here, I'd love to hear from you as you reflect on the Johari Window. What's one thing you will do at your internship in order to expand your open arena? So it would be soliciting feedback about a potential blind spot, share with a coworker something new about myself through self-disclosure, or try out a new opportunity or experience for self-discovery. So go ahead and select one after you've taken a moment to think about how you might be able to apply the Johari Window. Okay, great. It looks like a lot of folks are choosing to solicit feedback about a blind spot. And a lot of folks are also are interested in checking out self-discovery options, finding out and putting themselves in new opportunities or experiences. And a couple people are going to self-disclose with a coworker or something new about themselves. So now I want you to take a moment to make your plan for how you'll do it. If you chose soliciting feedback, take a moment to write down who you will ask for feedback and by when. And if you chose self-disclosure, write down what you will share about yourself and with whom. And if you choose self-discovery, write down what new opportunity you will try and by when. And just take a moment to think about how you will concretize this. Great. And now that we've spent some time on self-development and awareness through receiving feedback, we're going to change gears, and Jen is going to walk us through the skill of giving feedback effectively.
Thanks, Grace. So part of our goal is to help others increase their open arena as well. So when we see feedback as a tool for growth, then giving feedback also takes on a new feeling of helping others achieve their best as well. And so we wanted to spend some time today talking about how to give feedback really well. So feedback is the process of giving data to someone about their impact and the impact that they make through their actions, their attitudes, and the things that they've said. So it's information from our perspective. It's our experience that we're sharing with them, and it's powerful as an ongoing development tool. And I think the key here is I want to just keep on reframing that feedback is a way to help others grow. It's a way that people help us grow individually, and it's a way that we can help others grow. And in that way, it's a really powerful tool for all of us to be more effective as public health leaders. So there's two types of feedback, reinforcement and redirection. So reinforcement identifies behaviors that contribute in a positive way to the individual, the group, or the organization's goals. And when you reinforce a behavior, you're basically encouraging the person receiving the feedback to repeat and develop those actions. So typically that's, hey, that was really great, the way that you facilitated that meeting, or the way that you shared that important perspective. Please keep doing that. Redirection identifies behaviors that maybe aren't contributing as well and help a person develop alternative strategies. So a lot of us will often look at feedback. We automatically assume redirection, and we might think of it as negative. But when it's given well, it's an opportunity to expand your understanding and use it as a tool for achieving positive results. So why do we dread feedback? I know we all have our moments with that. Many of us are accustomed to being competent adults, and we want to do it right the first time. We like to think that we can do things right the first time. We can be hard on ourselves and take feedback as a reflection of our personality faults. And one of the reasons that we tend to resist it is that a good part of our self-image, for many of us, not all, is based on how others view us. So if we find out that someone sees us in less than a positive light, that might be hard to hear. That's completely human and natural, and yet when we reframe it, if we think to ourselves instead, if I know that I'm doing something ineffectively, or if that I didn't know that, but I find out I was doing something ineffectively, wouldn't I want to improve that performance? So instead, it's about having that open mind, thinking about it in terms of the Johari Window, to be able to listen to an opposing view. Similarly, when we give feedback to others, we want to reframe it that way as well. This is about helping others grow. So I wanted to just ask, and I'm going to ask people to chime in through the chat box, why do we give feedback? Yeah, to improve something, exactly. To address a problem or a challenge, to make things better, to help someone out. Yeah, and to improve communication. Those are all great. And here are some of the other ways that I had brainstormed about this. So to improve performance, which we talked about, to resolve and or prevent problems, or just to help things run more smoothly, to learn from past failures and mistakes, to help others succeed, and to really motivate others. So a friend of mine shared with me at one point about one of their first jobs, which is interesting. So they get to one of their first jobs, and it's this really feedback-rich environment. So it's one of these places where you're given feedback basically daily around how things are going. And this person just wasn't used to it. So when you're not used to it, they focused only on the bad and didn't realize that the feedback was about people trying to help them and really identifying growth areas to do better at their job. So this person was really tough on herself. She saw it as a judgment on her as a person, and rather than specific to traits and behaviors that she could change. Once she turned it around and saw it as an opportunity to improve, she ended up really valuing the feedback and seeing its impact on her growth. And so just to think about that sometimes it's hard for us, but when you reframe it, it's really helpful. So giving feedback. Back to the self-assessments, which thank you to many of you for letting us know about the challenge of what we put in there around the answer choices. We're going to try this again this time. So we're going to send this one as well after the webinar. It's around your self-assessment for giving feedback. So here's a quick glance at it, and then similar to last time, we're going to try out a few of them. So in terms of giving feedback, I provide specific, detailed information about a person's behavior or performance, and we're going to pretend that those options say rarely, sometimes, and often instead of never. Thank you again to those of you that pointed that out before. So I provide specific, detailed information about a person's behavior or performance, rarely, sometimes, and pretend that the third option says often. All right, great. So this is really good. We are seeing a range of people's sort of responses to this. For those of us that rarely are able to do this, it's hard to do that. It's hard to really provide specific, detailed information and not our own interpretations of things. And so it's good to really be honest about that, and hopefully as we work through this, you'll get some good strategies around ways to do that. So we're going to try this again, another one. I try to understand feedback. I'm going to skip ahead. I try to understand feedback from the other person's point of view and preferred communication style. And again, we're going to say rarely, sometimes, or often. Great. Okay, so again, we have a nice range there. And the reality is that all of us are in different places with each of these different sort of indicators. So just when you take that self-assessment poll again later on, self-assessment rather, just try and be really honest with yourself. And if you answer most of the questions often, that's great, and your skills for giving useful feedback are really well developed. If you answered a number of questions with rarely or sometimes, which I know for me, I'm always trying to grow in this, you're one of several, and your feedback skills could probably use some more development, and hopefully today will help us lay that groundwork. So you may remember this from our last webinar, that the elements of useful feedback are this acronym SAID. So they're standard, they're judged against benchmarks or standards applied to others as well. They're action-oriented, so you focus on the action taken, not on the interpretation of that action. They focus on impact, so the impact of the action on results, on others, on the process, etc. And finally, development. So how can this person take this experience to develop in the future? So there's those elements, and then there's also the delivery piece. How do we deliver feedback well? So most people are motivated more by feedback that is well delivered. And there are 7 steps total involved. So 4 are the SAID that we just talked about. Those are the content elements, and then we also want to talk about delivery. So I'm going to go through each of these 7 steps. The first step is the most in-depth, and the rest are pretty quick. So the first one, you want to plan your feedback. So the first question is why? What's your desired outcome? So, and do you have positive intent? And this is key. Think about feedback you've gotten from someone you really trust, a good friend, a colleague, someone who you know has your best interest at heart. How does that feedback land on you? Chances are when it's someone that you really trust, it lands pretty well because their positive intent for your growth is obvious. And this makes you more likely to hear it. So similarly, when you're giving feedback, ask yourself if you have positive intent and be really honest about it. If this is about, are you really about wanting this person to grow and improve? That's going to come across when you meet with them. So second, you want to ask yourself a series of questions to focus your feedback planning. First, can I identify and accurately describe the behavior or performance that I want to redirect or reinforce and its effect on others? And can I really get down to those specific actions? Can I identify and describe the results that I hope my feedback will produce? Is the person receiving the feedback really responsible for the act in question? And is this person open to receiving feedback from me? So you just want to take some time to think through each of these before you decide to give feedback. The third thing is you want to think about the location and the timing. So feedback, having a safe space is important. Think about the environment. Do you want to give feedback in an open area where a lot of colleagues are around? Possibly not. So really think about that. And think about the timing. So you want to give feedback as soon as it's reasonable or as soon as you're ready to after something occurs that you have some thoughts on. And ideally give it more frequently. And then finally, your tone. So preparing your feedback with a tone of concern for the individual is most effective for someone to be able to hear it. And I think if you just think about, again, times when you're able to hear feedback versus not, often when someone's concern comes through, it just makes us a lot more open to it. Other tones can be taken as criticism, and sometimes the message can get lost amongst that noise if all someone is hearing is criticism. So think about how you want to deliver it in a way that conveys your concern. So take a second and think about a recent time that you received feedback. What do you remember about that moment? So just take a second to think to yourself about that. Chances are that you remember things that are other than just the words that the person said. You likely remember the words, but you might also remember the location where you were, their tone, their body language, your general feeling in that moment. And the key here is that it's not just the words you hear. Your nonverbals do matter. Kaylee, I just saw your question, which is a great one. I'm going to hold that to the Q&A, but I think it's a really good one, so thank you. So how messages are heard. Feedback is seldom verbal only. Emotions, timing, location, body language, etc., all of that contribute to the feedback, to how feedback is received. So research has shown that a message is perceived in 3 different ways. 55% of what's conveyed to someone is nonverbal. It's your demeanor, your attire, your body language, your gestures. 38% is your vocal variety. So it's your pitch, it's your pace, your tone, how you pause, things like that. And only 7% is actually your words. It's the verbal content and organization. So be mindful of not just your words, but also your nonverbal communication and your vocal variety when you're giving feedback. So that was that first step. The second step, ask permission. Is the person open to feedback? Just ask before you start. Why? Sometimes there are other things going on for people. We have all been there, and someone just might not be able to hear the feedback in this moment. So life happens, allows people that space, that you want them to be ready to hear it when you provide it. The next 2 are things that we've already talked about, which are the S and the A from our model of giving feedback. So first, describe the situation, and this is about getting down to that very specific, detailed information. Where or when did the behavior occur? So today in our team meeting. Yesterday when you and I were talking after class. Then state your observations. Be specific about it, what you can see, what you can hear, what the person did or did not do, some of their words and also some of their nonverbals. Keep it objective. This is not about your opinions or interpretations. The observations are just what you see occur. The interpretations are your analysis or opinion of what you see occur, and you want to keep it back to observations. So a bad example is you don't give an awful lot of energy in meetings. A good example is in the meeting with Tina yesterday, I noticed you were using passive body language. A great example is if we pull in that standard part, which is comparing to a benchmark. In the meeting with Tina yesterday, I noticed that you were using more passive body language while everyone else was more actively involved. That's the level of sort of specific and situational and sort of observational feedback that you want to focus on. Next up, state the impact. What's the consequences of this behavior? So when you turned in that report 2 days early, I felt as though you really understood the pressures that I'm under. That's an impact on me. When you asked my opinion this morning, I felt included and like a full member of the team. Again, that's just the impact of a behavior on me. When you told me my concerns were overblown, I felt belittled. Stick to I statements. You may have heard that in each of those examples. It made me feel, I noticed that, I think that. So you want things, so here's another bad example. When you say X, you sound stupid. That's not helpful feedback. Good example, when you say X, it made me feel upset, or when you said X, it made me feel upset. Or when you said X, I noticed that our partner became irate. The impact of that. So you had a very specific situation, you described the specific behavior, and then the impact was the person started to feel more irate, or became more irate rather. After you've done that, pause. Just allow the other person some time to process the feedback, clarify any questions they may have, and make sure that they understand it. Ask them what they heard. Did they get the message you were aiming for? And then finally, turn it towards the future. Think about the development. How can this person take this experience to develop in the future? So offer just 1 or 2 actionable steps for improvement. It's a starting point. Don't overwhelm someone with trying to fix everything all at once. So again, in an example setting, a bad example might be talk more in meetings, right? But a good example is, so I'd encourage you to participate verbally at least once in every meeting. And I just like this quote. People have a habit of becoming what you encourage them to be, not what you nag them to be. I also like the picture because I'm a New Yorker, and I was trying to figure out exactly where they were standing that they were able to jump like that and get that in the background. I don't know if we have any other New Yorkers on the line right now. So I just want you to take a second to think of a situation in which you'd like to give some feedback to someone, preferably around your around your internship, and jot down a few notes regarding exactly what you would like to communicate, just as a starting point. And then I'm hopeful that you'll come back to these archive slides and be able to think about all those other pieces as well. So I'm going to give you just maybe 20 seconds to write something down. All right. So now I'm going to turn it back over to Grace for a brief summary and then Q&A.
Great. Thanks, Jen. So to recap, here are some things that we hope you'll take away with you today. When it comes to looking inwardly, developing self-awareness can make a difference and foster more effective working relationships. And soliciting feedback is one way to increase your self-awareness through the open arena and the Johari Window and relationships with those around you. When you're thinking about reaching out, think of feedback as a gift. When delivering feedback, always strive to express concern and positive intent, and stick with observations and the impact on you or the situation instead of inserting your interpretation of what happened. And as with all things, practice, practice, practice. It may feel awkward giving feedback at first, especially to superiors at work, but it will get easier with practice. So I think now we can turn it over to some question and answer time. And Jen's going to jump on with me to answer, and it looks like we had one earlier question.
Yeah.
Should I go ahead and read it?
Yeah. Do you want to read it?
Sure. So I'm curious about how the self-assessment might be quite different in a social friend setting versus work. Any advice about how to give feedback in a work environment to your boss or people who are more senior? I wonder if we could scroll back to the self-assessment to take a look at that. And while we do that, I can share just my thoughts on that, and then welcome yours, Jen. I think this could be a tricky thing because in some ways I think you could take the self-assessment and fill it out 2 times, one in the personal life realm and one in the work or internship setting, because it is completely different. You're not on a peer-to-peer kind of level when you're at the workplace thinking about giving your preceptor or other superiors or higher-ups feedback. So I guess for me, one way I approach it is I think first about how open to feedback that superior or supervisor is. So sometimes you may work with someone who actually have a boss who actually does ask you regularly for feedback, which is great. So if they ask you for it, you have an open-ended invitation, and as Jen mentioned earlier, I would still ask permission, because even if they ask for feedback on an ongoing basis, today might not be the day they're ready to receive it. So it might just be as simple as, can I share some feedback with you? And then take it from there. But in situations where I've had the sense where maybe a supervisor or higher up isn't that open to feedback, I kind of hold back and wait and just read the cues to see if there are opportunities to share it down the road. But if they don't seem that open to it, I don't really jump in and offer it unless I feel like they might be open to hearing it. So those are my thoughts. I don't know, Jen, if you have anything to add.
Yeah, a couple of quick thoughts. One is it's a really good question, and I agree, Grace, that it's really different in a personal setting versus in a work setting. I do think that practicing this focus on actions and impact, practicing that in all settings in your life, it's like muscle memory. The more that you do that, the more you'll be careful about really focusing on focusing on delivering feedback that way. I think the other thing is, especially this summer, you're in a really unique position as an intern, and preceptors, people who want to be preceptors, typically really care about your growth. And so those tend to also be the people who are interested in their own growth. So I would take this opportunity this summer to ask if you can provide some feedback and to really use this as an opportunity to practice and to help make the internship stronger for future students, for yourself this summer, things like that. I think just asking and saying, I have some observations. And like Grace said, you want to feel out the situation. The first time you're not going to come in and just say, well, I have some feedback I need to give you. But you might just say, I have some feedback as an intern. I come in with a different perspective. If you're open to it, I have some ideas that I'd like to share, and just sort of suss out their reaction. But I think often if you prep someone, either giving feedback up to your boss or laterally to your colleagues or friends, if you prep someone so that they know it's coming, oftentimes people are more open to it that way. So you just want them to have some advance warning. So we have another question. Do you have suggestions of how to elicit feedback when you don't have a close or trusted person to ask? So I'll jump in with this one, Grace, and then please chime in as well. So I think, Maggie, this is a great question, because a lot of us want feedback, but we want it from that person that we know absolutely has positive intent, and that's the ideal. However, sometimes we can get the best feedback from people who aren't that close to us, because they might be able to give us a different perspective on us. So I'd encourage you to try asking people that maybe aren't super close or really, someone that you know exceptionally well. Sometimes the impressions from people that we don't know as well can tell us a lot more about ourselves than those who maybe know everything else that's going on with us. So that's my thought on that. Grace, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think your idea there is where I was thinking too, of just trying it out. Even if you're not particularly close to someone at the workplace, you may want to try with something that's maybe like a low-hanging fruit, lower stakes type of question for feedback. So that could be something like, let's say you help facilitate a meeting and you just want to ask if it seemed and felt organized. Asking that may be lower stakes and feel less vulnerable than asking a question about, oh, could you tell, did I feel defensive? Did I come off defensive at all in that conversation, or something that may have more emotion behind it? So you may want to pick something that's a little more neutral to get feedback about the first time with someone new. And then from there, it might actually help build a deeper relationship with the person to be able to start to get to some of the more trusted, intimate conversations around feedback. It's a great question. So any other questions? Feel free to send in a question using the chat box, or you can raise your hand or take yourself off mute to ask a question verbally.
All right, looks like if you think of additional questions, please reach out and let us know.
Great. So yeah, if you have any additional questions, you all should have access to the CHL Leadership Toolkit. So there are a number of resources in there. We just expanded it also to include a section on communication, so you'll find a lot of resources around giving and receiving feedback. Another way is to reach out to your field supervisor for some feedback or some tips also on just how to make your time and communication at your internship more impactful. And troubleshoot with fellow students. That's another option. Always find out what other people are experiencing. We hear time and time again that some of the challenges people are experiencing at their internships is pretty common. So when they find out other people are going through the same challenges, it can be really validating and helpful. And of course, feel free to contact Jen or myself at any time with any questions or thoughts or reflections from the topic and the content today. So now we're going to change gears, and just briefly, I'm just going to, in closing, mention a few things in the last minutes about our Leading From Where You Are award, which, as Jen mentioned, you should have received an email about this week. And it's a leadership award for summer internships to be given to one student from each concentration. This is in recognition of a student's efforts to impact positive change and serve as a leader in his or her summer internship. So we define a leader as someone who motivates, empowers, and inspires a group of people to work toward and achieve a common goal or vision. And this is regardless of what type of position or title they might have at work. So in terms of specifics, all MPH students in internships are eligible to be nominated for the award, and as mentioned previously, one award will be given per concentration. Nominations will be solicited from preceptors, colleagues, peers, field supervisors, and yourself. Yes, it's true, you can even nominate yourself. We recognize that sometimes preceptors and other colleagues are not as aware of the day-to-day work that you're doing, so this gives you the opportunity to self-advocate as appropriate. For the timeline, nominations are open from early to mid-August and are due by August 28th. And awards will be given on September 24th at the Preceptor Recognition event. And you may be wondering what the selection criteria is. So here's the criteria that must be met to be considered for the award. Individuals must affect change in their organization, project, or community. You must go beyond your assigned responsibilities, so go beyond your job description. And the work must push you outside of your comfort zone and be independent of positional authority. And finally, your work must move forward a shared goal or a vision. Anything to add there, Jen, on this Leading From Where You Are award?
No, I think that's great. And I think, ideally we're going to look for things that might be able to satisfy all of these, but any situation where you satisfied at least one is something that we want to hear about and we want to celebrate.
Great. Thanks. And so just in closing, here are a couple action steps you can take after the webinar today. So what do you think you can do in the next month to increase your open arena at your internship? And what is one piece of feedback you can give to a colleague or preceptor at your internship? Finally, keep in touch. Let us know how it's going, and we love to hear what you're learning. And with that, this concludes our second of 2 summer leadership webinars. And we thank you for your time, for joining us, and we hope you have a great second half and end of your internships. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. And just want to say again a shout out and a thank you for your patience with any of the tech issues, including if any of the content and graphs on the slides moved around. For some reason, there were these pesky little tech gremlins in the background today. But we will be sending out links and to the recording and the slides so you can revisit the content. And have a great rest of the day. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.